Hello guys, welcome to the channel The Commerce Desk. My name is Yuvraj Chakravarti. Today we will see the explanation of Macbeth Act 3, written by William Shakespeare. Macbeth has finally become king, but instead of enjoying his crown, he is terrified. Why? Because the witches predicted that Banquo's descendants would become kings. So Macbeth begins thinking, I have killed Duncan to become king, but what if Banquo's family gets the throne after me? And this is where Act 3 becomes extremely important. Now, what is the central idea of Act 3? Macbeth has obtained power, but he has lost his peace. Act 2 was about committing the crime, that was killing Duncan. In Act 3, it is about protecting the power gained through crime. And Macbeth's transformation is now complete. Which transformation? Ambitious Macbeth turned into murderous Macbeth. After that, he turned into a tyrannical Macbeth. Now we will see scene 1. In the scene 1, Banquo thinks about the Macbeth's rise to power. This is the opening scene, okay, where Banquo is thinking about Macbeth's rise to power. Banquo remembers the witch's prophecy. He suspects that Macbeth may have obtained the crown through foul means. But here's the important part. Banquo himself is tempted by ambition, seeing that the prophecy has turned true in Macbeth's case. So now he thinks that it may also be successful in his case too. He remembers that the prophecy that his descendants will become kings. So Banquo is not completely free from ambition. You have to keep this in mind. Banquo is also ambition. But there is a crucial difference between the two men, that is Macbeth and Banquo. Banquo is tempted by ambition but does not act immorally to fulfill it, unlike Macbeth, who committed crime of murdering Duncan. Macbeth, on the other hand, allows ambition to control him. Shakespeare deliberately creates a foil between Macbeth and Banquo. Macbeth enters and speaks privately about Banquo, and here's the shocking development. Macbeth is now no longer afraid of Duncan because he had killed him, but he is now afraid of Banquo. Now, why is Macbeth afraid of Banquo? Because the witches said that Banquo's descendants will become kings. Macbeth therefore feels that he has committed terrible crimes only to establish a dynasty that will eventually belong to someone else's family. This is one of the most important ideas of Act 3. Macbeth's crown gives him no security. He has the crown, but Banquo has the future. Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown. This is one of the most important ideas in the entire play. Macbeth describes his crown as fruitless. Now, why Macbeth is describing his crown as fruitless? Because he does not have any offspring, and the crown will pass to Banquo's descendants, according to the prophecy of the witches. Macbeth has become king, but he believes his family will not continue the royal line. So Macbeth sees himself as someone who has done all the work but will receive none of the lasting benefits because he had polluted his soul. But what is the use of that? Eventually, the crown will be not passed to his heirs, and it will be passed to the offsprings or descendants of Banquo. Now he is feeling regretful of committing the crime. mine eternal jewel. Now, Macbeth is saying that his soul means comparing his soul with eternal jewel. He understands that his crimes have endangered his soul. He had polluted his soul. This is extremely important. Earlier, Macbeth hesitated before killing Duncan because he understood the moral consequences. But now what is the scene? He knowingly continues the same path. Before Duncan's murder, I don't want to commit evil. This was Macbeth's line. But after Duncan's murder, I have committed evil. I will commit more evil to protect myself. That is Macbeth's moral collapse. Macbeth hires murderers to kill Banquo. But there is something very interesting here. Macbeth does not personally kill Banquo. Instead, he manipulates other men into doing it. He tells the murderers that Banquo is responsible for their suffering. This shows Macbeth becoming increasingly calculating and manipulative. Duncan's murder required Lady Macbeth's encouragement. Banquo's murder is Macbeth's own plan. He does not include Lady Macbeth in this plan. This proves that Macbeth no longer needs Lady Macbeth to push him toward violence. This is perhaps the biggest character development point of Act 3. Lady Macbeth, when you durst do it, then you were a man. She had to challenge Macbeth's masculinity. She had to challenge Macbeth's masculinity before Duncan's murder. But now Macbeth independently plans murder. Therefore, Lady Macbeth's influence decreases. Macbeth's evil increases. Dramatic irony. Macbeth tells the murderers that Banquo is their enemy. But the audience knows the truth. Banquo is actually being killed because Macbeth fears the prophecy. This creates dramatic irony. Now, scene 2. We see something fascinating. Lady Macbeth has got what she wanted. Macbeth is king, but neither of them is happy. Lady Macbeth realizes we have gained everything, yet we have gained nothing. They have gained crown, power, status, but they have lost peace, sleep, emotional stability, moral security. Theme: Appearance versus reality. Macbeth is a successful king. Internally, Macbeth is frightened and a miserable man. Now we will see the Macbeth's mental condition in this scene. Macbeth says, "Oh, full of scorpions is my mind." This is one of the most important images in Act 3. Scorpions represent poisonous thoughts, fear, guilt, anxiety, mental torture. Macbeth's mind is now like a place filled with dangerous creatures. Notice that Macbeth doesn't say, "My kingdom is full of scorpions." He says, "My mind is full of scorpions." His greatest enemy is now his own mind. Macbeth hides his plans from Lady Macbeth. This is another major development. Macbeth plus Lady Macbeth is equal to partners in crime, which was before Duncan's murder. But after it, Macbeth keeps his plans secret from Lady Macbeth. He tells her, "Be innocent of the knowledge," which means don't ask what I am planning. At the beginning of the play, Lady Macbeth dominates Macbeth. By Act 3, Macbeth becomes more dominant. This is an important character development for point of view of the examination. Macbeth asks Knight to hide his actions. Night is repeatedly associated with darkness, murder, evil, secrecy. In this, a question can be asked for 5 or 10 marks to explain the significance of the night. Because Duncan's murder also took place in night, Banquo's murder is also being planned in night. ठीक है, तो night is a very important sign which is being symbolized as darkness, murder, evil, secrecy. This continues Shakespeare's darkness imagery throughout the play. Now scene 3. The murderers attacks Banquo and flees. Banquo is killed, but flees escapes. This is incredibly important. Why? Because the witches predicted Banquo's descendants would become kings. And flees fled. Means Banquo's descendant is still alive. Macbeth wanted to destroy the prophecy by killing Banquo, but Fleance survives. Therefore, Macbeth has failed. And Shakespeare creates dramatic irony because the audience knows that Macbeth's attempt to control destiny has not worked. This scene raises an important question. Can Macbeth control his destiny? Macbeth thinks, if I kill Banquo, I can prevent the prophecy. But Fleance escapes. Therefore, Macbeth cannot completely control the future. Shakespeare's message: Macbeth attempts to fight fate only creates more violence. Now, scene 4. This is probably the most important scene of Act 3 for examinations. Macbeth is hosting a royal banquet. Everything looks perfect. King Macbeth, royal guests, palace, celebration. But underneath the appearance of happiness, Macbeth is terrified. Macbeth enters the banquet and discovers the Banquo's ghost is sitting in his place. The ghost is visible to Macbeth but not to the other guests. This creates dramatic irony. The audience sees Macbeth losing control while guests don't understand why. Though can't not say I did it. Macbeth reacts to the ghost. He knows that he is responsible for Banquo's death. The ghost therefore represents Macbeth's guilt. Whether the ghost is objectively supernatural or simply a manifestation of Macbeth's disturbed mind can be debated. For an exam answer, say Banquo's ghost externalizes Macbeth's guilt and psychological torment. Macbeth's fear becomes public. This is extremely important. Until now, Macbeth's fear and guilt were mostly private. At the banquet, everyone begins noticing his strange behavior. Therefore, his psychological instability threatens to become politically dangerous. A king must appear stable, confident, and authoritative. But Macbeth appears frightened, disturbed, and irrational. Lady Macbeth tries to control the situation. Lady Macbeth tells the guest that Macbeth has suffered from similar episodes since childhood. She tries to convince everyone that his behavior is temporary. But she also attacks Macbeth privately. She essentially reminds him that he is behaving unlike a man. This recalls her earlier method of controlling him. But there's a difference. Earlier, Macbeth listened, but now Macbeth is psychologically beyond her control. Macbeth sees Banquo sitting in his place. This is symbolically powerful. The seat represents Macbeth's kingship, but Banquo's ghost occupying it suggests Macbeth's throne is haunted by the consequences of his crime. As there is another layer. Banquo's descendants are supposed to inherit the throne, so Banquo's presence symbolically threatens Macbeth's claim to power. Blood will have blood. This is one of the key lines of Act 3. which means violence creates more violence and murders, eventually bringing consequences. Macbeth has already killed Duncan, now Banquo is dead. Soon more blood will be spilled. The cycle continues. Violence and its consequences is the theme of this scene. Shakespeare shows that once Macbeth chooses violence as a solution, he becomes trapped in a cycle of violence. Macbeth decides to visit the witches again. At the end of the banquet scene, Macbeth decides, I will go to the witches. This is significant. Earlier, Macbeth received the prophecies accidentally. Now he actively seeks supernatural knowledge. Macbeth is becoming increasingly dependent on the supernatural. He wants certainty, but the supernatural will ultimately deceive him through equivocal prophecies. Scene 5. Hecate, goddess of witchcraft, appears. Now, in this scene, Shakespeare introduces us with Hecate, who is the mistress of the witchcraft. She criticizes the witches for dealing with Macbeth without involving her. She says Macbeth will become overconfident because of their prophecies. This scene is extremely important because it prepares us for Act 4. It is a short scene. Scene 5. Overconfidence. Hecate plans to make Macbeth security, meaning overconfident and falsely secure. Macbeth will believe that he is practically invincible, but that confidence will ultimately contribute to his downfall. Scene 6. Lennox is speaking with other lords. The final scene is politically very important. Lennox and another lord discuss the recent events, and now Shakespeare shows us Scotland is beginning to turn against Macbeth. Macbeth is no longer viewed as a legitimate king. He is increasingly seen as a tyrant. Lennox uses sarcasm in his speech. Lennox speaks sarcastically about Duncan's death and Banquo's death. On the surface, he sounds as if he believes Macbeth's explanations, but underneath his words is a mockery and suspicion. This is called verbal irony. Lennox doesn't openly accuse Macbeth yet, but his language reveals his distrust. Macduff has gone to England. Why? He wants to seek help from Malcolm and ultimately challenge Macbeth. This is the beginning of the political resistance against Macbeth. No, he wants to seek help from the King of England to raise the army against Macbeth. Macbeth's problem is no longer just psychological, it has now become political. Macduff goes to England to join Malcolm. They hope to obtain support against Macbeth. Therefore, Shakespeare is setting up the future conflict Macbeth versus the forces of Scotland and England. Complete Act 3 themes: ambition, guilt, violence, fate versus free will, appearance versus reality, psychological conflict, kingship versus tyranny, supernatural. Now, what are the most important exam points if you are preparing for ISC class 12th examinations? Macbeth's fear shifts from Duncan to Banquo. Macbeth's ambition becomes a desire for security and dynasty. Fruitless crown represents Macbeth's childlessness and lack of a lasting dynasty. Macbeth independently plans Banquo's murder, showing his moral deterioration. Lady Macbeth's influence decreases. Banquo's ghost represents Macbeth's guilt and psychological disturbance. Fleance's escape keeps the prophecy alive. The banquet demonstrates the conflict between appearance and reality. Macbeth becomes increasingly dependent on the supernatural. Macbeth's tyranny causes political opposition, particularly from Macduff and Malcolm. So guys, if we have to understand Act 3 in one sentence, remember this. Macbeth gets the crown but loses his peace, morality and control over his own mind. So Act 3 is basically the moment when Macbeth's victory begins turning into his downfall. So by this, we come to an end of the explanation. I hope that you all understood the explanation. I will meet you in the next video. Thanks for watching.